Today's lesson is called Solving Quadratic Equations Using the Quadratic Formula. Now, I'm sure you've done this before in your career, but this is called the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. The a, b, and c come from this equation. So a is always the number in front of x squared, b is always the number in front of x, and c is always the number by itself. So here's an equation, x squared plus 7x plus 10. Remember, if there's nothing written in front of x squared, we just assume it's a 1. So my first advice on these kind of problems is to figure out what is a, what is b, and what is c. A is always the number in front of x squared, so that's a 1. B is always the number in front of x, so that's a 7. And c is always the number by itself, so that's 10. So once I have a, b, c, then I can simply plug them into this equation. So the equation always starts as x equals. Now, negative b just means whatever b is, I'm going to do its opposite. So b is 7, so I make it negative 7. Plus or minus is always part of the equation. The square root is always part of the equation. And now for this term, I'm supposed to take b squared. So what I would do is take 7 and square it in your head. So 7 times 7 is 49. This b squared will always be positive, even if the b was negative. If it was negative 7 and I squared it, it would be negative 7 times negative 7, and it would still be positive 49. Then it's always minus 4. That's always part of the equation. And then I do a and c multiplied by 4. So a is 1, c is 10. And then I'm going to divide everything by 2 times a. It's always 2. So a is a 1. So now I'm going to simplify. And we're going to start with leaving the negative 7 plus or minus alone. We'll do that at the end. Here, to simplify, all you do is multiply negative 4 times 1 times 10. So I'll have 49. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. And negative 4 times 10 is negative 40. So I just multiply these three numbers together. Forget about that it's subtraction for right now, and just treat that 4 like it's a negative 4. So negative 4 times 1 times 10, negative 40. On the bottom, 2 times 1 is just 2. Now you can subtract the 49 minus 40. That's 9. Everything else stays the same, the negative 7 and the 2. Now the square root of 9 is 3. That's negative 7 plus or minus 3 over 2. On these, when you take the square root, you don't have to worry about having two answers because there's already a plus or minus in the equation. Like the equation knows there's two answers, so you don't have to worry about thinking the square root of 9 is 3 and negative 3. That's built into the equation already. Once you get this far, you have to solve two equations. Once with adding these two together and once with subtracting these two together. So up here, I'm going to write negative 7 plus 3 over 2. And down here, I'm going to write negative 7 minus 3 over 2. So one equation has plus, one equation has minus. That takes care of the plus minus. So negative 7 plus 3 is negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. So there's one answer. Over here, negative 7 minus 3 is negative 10. Divided by 2 is negative 5. There's my two answers. Let's try another example. Again, there's a 1 in front of the x squared. I'm going to write down what a, b, and c are. A is 1, b is negative 8, c is 15. So the number next to x is always b, and if it's subtracted, then you write negative 8. So now I'm going to fill into the equation. It's x equals negative b, but b was already negative. So a negative times a negative actually makes it positive. Then b squared, negative 8 squared is 64. Then minus 4 is always part of it. And then I have to multiply by a and c. So a is 1, c is 15. I like to use parentheses to keep it all straight. Then divided by 2 times a. So now remember, we're doing the middle first, and we treat this like a multiplication problem. So the 8 plus or minus stays, the 64 stays, and I go negative 4 times 1 times 15. You can do it on your calculator, it's negative 60. And 2 times 1 is 2. So 64 minus 60 is 4, and the square root of 4, of course, is 2. And I don't have to worry about the negative square root of 4, or the square root of 4 is also negative 2 because there's a plus or minus in the equation. So now I solve two equations, once with adding 8 plus 2 and once with subtracting 8 minus 2. So 8 plus 2 over 2, 8 minus 2 over 2. So this is 10 over 2, which is 5. This is 6 over 2, which is 3. There's my two answers. Hopefully everybody has done this before. So the first thing I would do, example number 3 on the back of the worksheet, is write down a, b, and c. Fill into the equation, so it's x equals, now this time a b is 6, so negative b would be negative 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 6 times 6 is 36, minus 4 times a times c. All over, now 2 times a is just going to be 2 times 1, so we can just write 2 if you want. So I'm going to multiply these three numbers together. So negative 4 times 1 is negative 4, times 9 is negative 36. So I have 36 minus 36. When you subtract these, you actually get 0. And the square root of 0 is just 0. So this is really negative 6 plus or minus 0 over 2. Now, adding or subtracting 0 is not going to change this answer. Negative 6 plus 0 is going to be negative 6, and negative 6 minus 0 is going to be negative 6. So really, all I have to do to solve this is negative 6 divided by 2, which is negative 3. So this one only has one answer. If there's 2 blanks on Moodle, just type it in twice, okay? So if this stuff in here ends up as 0, like this, all you really have to do is the negative 6 divided by 2. Last example, I have a is 1, b is 5, c is 7. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times 1 times 7, all over 2. So again, first step is always, we'll multiply these together. So negative 4 times 1 is negative 4, times 7 is negative 28. So I have 25 minus 28 over 2. So I'll subtract these two. I get negative 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 over 2. Because 25 minus 28 is negative 3. Now, hopefully you remember, you are not allowed to take the square root of negative 3. That is no solution. So we are stuck at this point. So we would write no solution. Okay, so sometimes on these problems, you'll get 2 answers. If the stuff in the square root ends up to be 0, you're only going to get 1 answer, but you'll type it in twice. And if you do this and the stuff in the square root is negative, then you get no solution. If this is confusing or you're still a little bit nervous about it, you could watch the video one more time. I think that would help.